Welcome to another edition of the Rush Behind's Top 10 Countdown. This week we're looking at the top 10 biggest moments that changed the game. And jeepers creepers, have these been massive in making footy what it is today. Now, there's been a great deal of change since the game's inception, so we've tried to cram as much as we can into a top 10 list. Well, there's a lot to get through, so let's get cracking. Now, this might seem part and parcel of today's game, but the humble drop punt wasn't there from the get-go. Just like Polly Farmer revolutionised the handball and made it the offensive weapon it is today, the drop punt over time gained incredible popularity before ousting the drop kick and becoming the most widely used skill in Aussie rules. Talk about a game changer.
For some reason, back in the day, they thought drop kicking a ball would be more efficient. It doesn't really make sense, does it? You put the ball on the ground, you wait for it to jump back up and kick it, you're not going to get nearly as much mileage. And someone said, well, why don't we just drop it from our hands and let it fly? And here we are now.
That someone, or someones, who brought the drop punt into the VFL were brothers Albert and Harry Collier, who first utilised the savvy way of passing in substitute for the handball. Now, we should clarify and say brought into the VFL, with the drop punt first recorded all the way back in 1907 in Carisbrook. There's a fun little fact for you. But the unique kicking style of the Colliers caught the eye of one legendary Jack Dyer, and I think now is the perfect time to bring in Athos Sirianos for some Richmond nuffery.
Now, Richmond's Jack Dyer then realised how effective and accurate this was, so he adopted it when kicking for goal and thus became the first player to use it as a set shot.
From there, its popularity expanded quicker than TikTok. Dyer was credited as its inventor, and the mode of kicking replaced the age-old drop kick to become the most potent weapon in the footballer's arsenal. Well, maybe not too potent.
It's probably the one thing that players haven't really improved on kicking for goal. I'd say Jack Dyer could probably challenge most players to a goal kicking competition and probably come out on top.
Where do we begin with the great Kevin Sheedy? Enigmatic, quirky, cunning, but most of all, revolutionary.
Well, as a player, Kevin Sheedy was known for his creative way of thinking and for pushing the envelope, and that translated directly into his coaching career. He revolutionised the footy calendar, he created some of the biggest spectacles, and he really was someone who propelled modern football forward.
Sheedy can be credited for some of the biggest games on the football calendar, such as Dreamtime at the G and Anzac Day. And he's responsible for some of the most baffling and hilarious moments off the field. That dig about certain North Melbourne figures being as soft as marshmallows is my top favourite. That or his obsession with the Martians, or tying the windsock down at Windy Hill, or the jacket wave. It's pretty tough. But what's indisputable is Sheedy's passion for promoting and expanding the game. He's been an ambassador for Aussie rules both in Australia with Indigenous communities and abroad, and has been a major driver in the way modern football is perceived.
Where would we be without Kevin Sheedy? Wherever he has gone, he's had the growth and expansion of the game in mind. He's a visionary, he's a fantastic storyteller. We would be down in the dumps without him. He's a true legend and inspiration, and a true immortal of our game as well. Gone are the days when players are expected to run around the botanical gardens in 40-degree heat without any water. Yes, that really happened.
Gee whiz, I'm glad I wasn't around for that. It almost sounds like there should have been something in place that should help assist in players' physical and mental well-being. And it's a good thing there is one in place today. The focus on AFL players' physical and mental health has become increasingly prevalent in recent years, particularly in the areas of concussion and mental awareness.
They're two of the biggest issues facing the AFL at the moment. From a concussion point of view, you only need to look as far as Liam Picken and Dan Venables and Ben Jacobs and Paddy McCartan and several others whose lives have been turned upside down. It's quite confronting stuff, hearing a lot of it. And from a mental health perspective, there's encouraging work going on in that space with the AFL appointing a head of mental health and wellbeing and a clinical psychiatrist. So there's now networks in place for players, officials and other people in the footy industry to use. So this is a massive game changer.
And there are issues which aren't just affecting current day players, coaches and officials, but former figures involved with the game stretching back years. With awareness improving, support networks in place and the importance of both issues paramount to the future of our game, we're starting to see a change, which will keep the game thriving for many years to come.
The stigma around men's mental health has changed a lot, especially since we've seen a lot of it happen with Tom Boyd in his stance and obviously retiring because he fell out of love with the game, and there's a lot of pressure that falls on these players, and it's good to see the AFL starting to recognise the changes that are needed to be made in order to allow for these players to feel safe and feel like they're in the right mental space to be able to play and need to take that time off in order to get their heads right and in order to make sure they're feeling healthy, not just physically but mentally as well, because it works so part and parcel.
We've got a long way to go, but we've certainly come a long way from where we were back in the day.
And of course, if this has brought anything up for you at home, Lifeline is 13 11 14.
Why was this even a thing? I could not stand it. I really couldn't. No wonder they got rid of the sub after 5 years. It was just a shocker.
Ah, there's the Nick I know and love. But I have to agree with you there, mate. The sub rule was an absolute stinker. Wait, hang on. Just getting something in my ear. Athos, you've got something to say about it?
I don't know why the players were so upset by the introduction of the substitute rule. They got a full match payment for only a quarter of the work. It sounds like a dream job if you ask me.
Well, that's got me thinking about my workload here at the Rush Behind. I only voice a top 10 package once a week. Where do I sign up? But yes, we all know about the sub rule and how that changed the game for the handful of years it was in effect. Come to think of it, let's not pigeonhole ourselves into just the sub rule. Chris, am I right in saying there were actual substitutes in the game before all this vest business?
Yeah, you're right, Will. So there'd been a lot of debate about the substitute going back as far as the 1910s. But by 1930, the VFL introduced the 19th man, and in 1946 it introduced the 20th man. So these were the first substitutes, if you will, before the interchange was brought in during the 1970s and went through a couple of iterations before we ended up with the four-man interchange bench in 1998. Probably another little fun fact, if you were the 19th man back in the day, you'd only get a match payment if you actually ran onto the field. So it was very hit or miss about whether you'd actually get your payment in the end.
Lucky you were born now instead of the 1930s, Athos. But there's been enough interchange talk throughout most of the modern era to put anyone to sleep. So we'll do the right thing by you and bypass all that nitty-gritty, except to say that the impact it has had has been huge. Well, you wouldn't expect the AFL to pass up the chance at two sold-out back-to-back grand finals, and you'd be right. It's been exceptionally rare throughout the competition, with a drawn grand final occurring just 3 times. One in 1948 between the Demons and the Bombers, one in 1977 between the Roos and the Magpies, and of course in 2010 between the Magpies and the Saints. As per the rulebook of the time, if a grand final ended up tied at the final siren, the result would be determined by a replay the following week. That was the case right up until the 2010 granny.
After the debacle that was in that grand final, they just decided to say, we can't do this anymore. We're gotta bring in extra time, because extra time just solves the problem.
2010. Sounds like a perfect time to flick to Chris. Mate, how good would it have been if there was a bit of extra time in the 2010 grand final? Yeah, look, that was probably deserving. But yes, extra time would have solved all the problems of a replay the following week. After the 2010 draw, the replay rule was abolished and extra time became the new precedent. Who knows when we'll see it next?
Free agency, in not just footy but around the world, has changed everything. Players having unrestricted free agency, restricted free agency. Surprised we haven't got the player and team options yet like they've got in the NBA and NFL. Players can just get up and go at any time once their contracts are up.
In terms of being a game changer, this one is absolutely huge in its impact. Free agency gives players another vehicle to transfer from one club to another, and as we've seen throughout its limited lifespan, can completely shake up the makeup of the competition. All the nitty-gritty stipulations and limitations. It's enough to make your head spin. But what will really do that is the compensation formula, where clubs are allocated picks at the national draft to recoup losses of big names. I think I need to lie down now.
The free agency had a massive impact on the way clubs deal with players and, most importantly, their agents. All of a sudden, players are being offered large sums of cash from everywhere, having a real impact on the way clubs trade and deal with their players, and keeping everyone, including the agents, on their toes.
The national draft has been a monumental game changer in terms of player access and equalisation, and after replacing the long-standing zoning system, has made the so-called off-season one of the busiest and hectic times of the football year.
Back in the day, each team had a priority, a bit of a zoning system as you like. So each team had a part of Victoria where they just go and poach and poach and poach and poach. Then I decided, well, I think everyone deserves a bit of free rein, and the national drafts came in.
The draft was first held in 1981 and 1982, before the first modern draft was held in 1986. It put a spotlight on recruiters, analysts, strategists, list managers and talent scouts, who now had a massive amount of pressure to select the best player for their side from all over the country.
The national draft completely changed everything about how players ended up at certain clubs. Now it's just a complex beast. You've got father-son selections, priority picks, mid-selection drafts, pre-selection drafts, rookie drafts. Now you've got academies coming into the mix. It's just absolutely bonkers. But it's something that's completely changed the landscape of the competition. There's no doubt about that.
Gone were the days where players would just rock up on a club's doorstep because they lived next door or in the recruitment zone. Teams had to actually work hard towards securing the best talent. Now, we know there'll be draft sliders and draft blunders. There have been plenty, and there will be more in years to come. But the clubs who have been successful post-1981 are the ones who have invested proper money in good recruitment policies.
Now, we've talked a lot about rule changes and structural overhauls of our game, but when it comes to individual acts on the field, this stands head and shoulders above the rest.
So 1993 at Victoria Parks in Kilda v Collingwood, Nicky Winmar and Gilbert McAdam were subject to some really disgusting racial comments from the Collingwood cheer squad. At the time, at half-time, they came together and they said, we're going to win this game no matter what, and they turned it on. Gilly kicked 5 goals, and I think Nicky had nearly 30 disposals, and at the end of the game, the Saints won, and Nicky Winmar's proud stand, having he pulled up his jumper, and he showed that he was proud to be an Indigenous Australian. It's one of the most lasting moments in not just the Australian game, but in Australian sport in general. It's an absolutely huge moment.
Wayne Ludby's photograph of Winmar's generation-defining stand has been immortalised as one of the most significant moments in Australian sport. Almost 3 decades on, the emotion and significance of the proud gesture hasn't faded. In fact, it's often been credited as a catalyst for the movement against racism in Aussie rules. Unfortunately, that still isn't something that's completely faded away.
At the end of the day, that has really spurned what is this whole recognition of Dreamtime football, the Indigenous stars of this game, and you know what, it really started obviously having a chance to really reap the equality of what Australians should be.
Winmar's proud moment was immortalised in bronze in 2019 and grandly stands out the front of Perth's Optus Stadium.
It sent a strong message right around the country and pioneered a generation of really strong Indigenous leaders and footballers such as Adam Goods, Michael O'Loughlin, Michael Long, who have since sent so many powerful messages and have taken this message on board in helping Australia cleanse itself of all the racism that's happening.
Nicky Winmar's stand was one of the most recognisable moments in the football world. Its significance to a nation and a people unparalleled. Women playing football in a national competition? How utterly absurd! Yes, that's right, I can hear all you naysayers yelling at your TV screens right now. But in 2017, that dream became reality when the AFL Women's League was launched.
What all the players really in the AFLW space are doing at the moment, they're pioneers for the next generation, and this is, I think, the most important thing for the upcoming generation of football players, because they can see, I can play football regardless if I'm a boy or a girl. It becomes irrelevant in that, and that's probably the most important thing. It's taking the next step towards having an equal footing between the men's and the women's competition, and what the AFLW is doing at the moment is fantastic.
Every single player is helping change perceptions, encourage equality, and so much more. They've become more than just players, but role models to girls and boys everywhere. Yep, that's definitely a game changer in our book.
It only took the AFL 100 years to introduce a women's league. Women have been playing Aussie rules since the First World War. There was a match in 1929 at the Adelaide Oval, which attracted over 41,000 spectators. It's nothing new, women are playing footy, but thank God they introduced this league, because we've seen some fantastic talent emerge. Maddie Prasparkas is already doing wonderful things, and she's only 19. Erin Phillips has been great. Taylor Harris have been all strong role models for aspiring female footy players, and we're very excited to see what this league transforms into.
AFLW has come with its fair share of detractors, but just look around and see the impact it's having. Women's footy teams at both grassroots and senior levels have skyrocketed, with female players now making up a third of all Aussie Rules participants worldwide. After all, it's Australia's game, not Australian men's game.
And once it keeps expanding and we get 18 teams in there, I'd be very intrigued to see how the competition goes. Will we see a full competition throughout the whole year? Will we still see it segregated into conferences? Who knows? But I love it. AFLW is here to stay.
And if we've already seen this explosion after just 4 years of the national women's competition, just imagine what it will be like in 10, 20, even 50 years' time. I can tell you one thing, it's going to be bloody awesome.
Victoria received quite the rude shock in the late 80s when they realised, hey, the other states can play football too, and thus the national competition was born, and initially dominated by the interstate sides.
It may seem like a little thing, but transforming the V in VFL into the A of AFL has been the biggest impact our game has ever seen. In 1990, the VFL officially became a national competition, adopting the AFL moniker and reflecting its standing as Australia's game. Without this significant change, we almost wouldn't have any of the other items on this list. This was the catalyst for everything.
You talk about game changers, and this is deservedly a number one in terms of how it's completely altered the footy landscape. I know us guys, we're spring chickens, we were born in the AFL era, we don't know much different, we never witnessed any of that and that change, but it's the bedrock for what we all know at the moment. Just think about it. We've seen the introduction of the draft, new teams coming in into a national competition, AFLW, see how the media landscape operates now, it becoming a part-time to professional competition. This is the catalyst that made everything the way it is today.
Spot on there, mate. We saw new teams, and this expansion and subsequent growth off the back of it has been absolutely rootin' tootin' gigantic.
Gone were the days where players could have a cheeky dart and a pint at half time, as the competition became fully professional, with players able to quit their part-time jobs and focus solely on being professional footballers. It's fantastic that the competition has become fully professional and has expanded. It's allowed for more women and children to attend matches, and the AFL just continues to get bigger and bigger. We've taken it nationwide. We've included nearly all the states, sorry Tassie, and now the AFL are looking to take the game internationally as they plan their own little world domination.
That's right, it doesn't seem like the AFL is slowing down at all, and who knows, Australia's game might become a bit more than just Australia's game a little while down the track.
The expansion of this game has gone massive. It's, women are now getting involved, the expansion that we've got international players playing, so it's good to see that these expansions come through, and what is only really played in one major league in one country, being the AFL, it's good to see that starting to be recognised throughout the whole world.
We've already seen the international influence become part of our game, and with premiership points now being contested overseas, the world is literally the AFL's oyster. A blockbuster expansion which has forever changed footy and made it what it is today sounds like a more than deserving number one in our top 10 countdown of the biggest moments that have changed the game.